Oh.
Who did this? Joe Burrow? Josh W. says, what happened with Bisping? I've talked about the Bisping thing so many times at this point. I did an entire episode of Lewis Journal where I spent 20, 30 minutes kind of breaking it down. But there's no love lost. I mean, it is what it is. You know, me and Bisping, we just stopped, it stopped being the right show. Long before I left, it stopped being the right show for me. I didn't really give a shit about MMA anymore. It was very much the Michael Bisping show. I was kind of growing into my own thing, right? We were doing it for a while. I was just his sidekick, and it was the Believing Me with Michael Bisping. And at one point, I outgrew that role. If you look at my shows now, every show that I do is 2 or 3 times as popular as Believe You Me. And that's not a knock to Believe You Me. It is what it is. I have more popular shows. And yeah, at one point, I tried to leave the show a year before we got into our thing. And yeah, he ended up convincing me to stick around, against my better judgment. We were very different during the whole pandemic. You guys remember, like, I know Bisping now is like a fucking company man, and he sort of follows Dana White's lead, and I haven't watched it, but from my understanding is now he's fucking talking about how everyone was dumb about the pandemic. But if you listen back to the old episodes, he would call me a fucking idiot. And when I questioned the lockdowns and questioned the pandemic, and he was one of these rich Hollywood elites going, stay home. Yeah, mate, stay home. Don't go to work. And you're like, bro, it's easier for you to stay home. You're a multimillionaire. Like, most people can't just stay home. So we butted heads a lot about that stuff. If we ever talked about any social or political issues, we started having a very big difference of opinion. And when we went out to do that tour with him, he painted it as me saying like, oh, I'm a headliner, and I like that. It wasn't me pretending that I should be headlining over Michael Bisping. That's retarded. Michael Bisping had his own shows. I was warming up for the shows. And I booked myself some headlining shows on the off nights of that tour. And he made me cancel those shows because I don't even know why. I was just trying to make money, as much money as possible, when I was out leaving my family for a full week. And he was like, yeah, mate, you can't do that. I wasn't even listed on his shows. It wasn't Believe You Me with Michael Bisping and luisjgomez. It wasn't, An Evening with the Count Michael Bisping with your opener, luisjgomez. I wasn't even listed. So me selling my own tickets for my own shows on off nights wasn't taking anything away. He was just fairly controlling, and he wanted things to be his way. And we bumped heads over that. And he made me cancel like $12,000 worth of shows. And the argument ensued because originally I was booked to just open his shows and do warm up. And then in the middle of the entire process, he asked me if I can come on stage with him and sort of do a producer role and pull stuff up on the computer and almost essentially be a Harrington while he was on stage. And I didn't really want to do it. And I agreed to do it begrudgingly. I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. And then when he made me cancel those shows, I was like, well, dude, I didn't ask you for more money when you asked me to do the computer stuff. I just, I said I would do it. And he got very mad that I brought that up. And then he ended up having his friend do it instead, and we sort of bumped heads and got into a big argument about that. And that was sort of the end of the show. But I was ready to go a year before that. And yeah, that's that. I mean, there's no ill will. I was making a very small percentage of the revenue that was coming in on that show. I was starting to grow into my own sort of thing. And yeah, I think he's happier doing it with people that really know MMA. I was never going to fucking watch the prelims for a UFC event. That just wasn't going to happen. So, and then, once again, we would just bump heads. Like, I wanted to just talk about life and fucking have like a fun podcast that was MMA centric, but, we could talk about other shit. And he was moving much more into a serious toned podcast where he would want to interview fighters and he wanted to, really break down all the events. And it just wasn't what I wanted to do with my career. And as soon as MMA started becoming more popular and every fucking cool kid and their mother was watching MMA, I just sort of fell out of love with it. And that's the truth. So, but yeah, that's sort of what happened with the Believe You Me podcast. But it's not a knock on him. I'm happy. I'm happy that he's doing his thing, and I'm happy that Harrington and Brian are still working with him. And that's that. I don't hold any ill will. That just is what it is, baby.